Hey guys, the CWL Pro League is going to be starting in 10 days, and we've already figured out the 16 teams that qualified for that Pro League, 5 from Europe, 1 from Australia, and 10 from North America. But there was a lot of drama in the last tournament, CWL New Orleans, surrounding which teams did qualify and which teams did not. And I know for a lot of people that are new to Call of Duty, or even people that sort of follow Call of Duty for a while but they haven't been super into it, this whole pro point thing can be really confusing. I had someone comment on a post about it, and I started typing basically a paragraph to explain it all because it was very confusing, and I just thought, screw it, I'm going to make a video on this because it's really complex, it's difficult to understand, and it's not all bad. It's not something you can really criticize MLG for because you can see a lot of good in what they're trying to do. It's just important to pick out the flaws, the places to improve upon. So if you know about this whole GB scandal, not even a scandal, but you know about this whole GB thing, this video probably isn't for you. But if you're someone that even has a little bit of confusion about why there's drama involving who made the Pro League and who did not, I'm going to sort of dive into it. So at the beginning of every Call of Duty season, they announce the Pro League that's going to happen. And it doesn't happen from day one, it happens later in the year. Usually at the middle point of the season. In Infinite Warfare, it actually took a while. I think it was like 4 months before the Pro League actually got started. This year, it was a little bit faster. I think it was 3 months into the competitive season that we're going to be having the Pro League starting up in about a week. But you have to determine which 16 teams qualify for that Pro League, and that's very contentious because every year different teams are better than other players. I mean, certain players are better than other players. All this stuff changes with the new game. So you need a way of figuring out which teams really belong in the Pro League. So you have to accumulate pro points. Every player has their own pro point value. Now there's 3 ways that you accumulate pro points that are very different from each other. Number 1 being placing well at CWL Dallas, CWL New Orleans. Number 2, placing well at weekly online 2K tournaments that are free to sign up for on Game Battles. And number 3, earning pro points by playing Game Battles every day. You're allowed to do it 5. You're allowed to win 5 matches per day and earn pro points for that. But after that, they capped it. Because during Infinite Warfare, it became a competition of whether you would play 8 matches or 10 matches that day. And the people that were playing 10 were more likely to qualify for the Pro League. And it was really disrespectful to pro players to think that they couldn't be practicing and scrimming because they were too busy playing their GBs. So MLG did drop a cap and say that 5 was the maximum. But that's still kind of a grind for pro players that rather than practicing and improving with their team, they have to get those 5 GB wins every day or risk falling behind. So although you could make an argument for that cap to be lowered even more or perhaps change the system entirely, that's the way it happened. So those are the 3 ways that a player gets pro points. And the top, we're going to focus on North America for this. The top 10 North American teams with the most pro points from all their players combined qualify for the league. So those pro points are huge. Now here's the thing. If you didn't attend CWL Dallas or CWL New Orleans, there's 0 way that you qualify for the Pro League. You absolutely need to have good placings at both of those events to qualify for the Pro League. So there's a large community of amateur players that are, maybe they have dreams of going pro, or maybe they just like playing the GB ladder, that aren't going to attend those events, or, couldn't get a team pass for those events, and they have 0 chance of becoming a pro player, but they like playing in the online 2K tournaments with, their 3 teammates, and they like playing the GB ladder from time to time. Some of them are just, laid back, they like to do it. Some of them are actually trying to be pro, and they're not pro players yet, but they're grinding, they're working really hard, they're playing a lot of GBs, and they love that competitive environment because they want to maybe someday be a pro player. So that's where the GB ladder comes in, is that you have every day all these GB matches happening because all these pro players are trying to get their 5 GBs every day. Every weekend there's that 2K where hundreds, I think sometimes like 1,000 teams will participate. And it's a single elimination bracket where for the pro teams, those first 3-4 rounds are just the easiest 3-0s in the world. But then after that, it gets really competitive because of online COD being problematic at times and host problems. And the results aren't always perfect, but most of the time, really good teams win 2Ks. There's never a team that wins a 2K and it shocks everyone. The teams that win 2Ks deserve it because they played really good Call of Duty over the course of the weekend. So there's the events, there's the 2K tournaments, and there's the daily GBs. That's how you earn pro points. That's how you qualify for the league. So the system, I have to say, is really novel because it means that anyone can sign up for 2Ks, anyone can sign up, play GBs every day. There's no barrier to becoming a pro other than talent. Now, obviously, the system still isn't perfect because you need to be noticed by organizations or you need to have some kind of financial accommodations to get you to those events. And the open bracket for both Dallas and New Orleans were sold out so quickly that I know there's a lot of people that, perhaps could have done well in open bracket or something, or wanted to participate at events but couldn't. So there still is that problem of the open bracket at events not being big enough. But then at the same time, if you look at who actually makes it out of the open bracket, there's never a team of 4 players that nobody ever heard of that gets out of open. Those teams are, rarely is there a surprise, and even when there is a surprise team that makes it out of open, they immediately lose in the next round of it, so they can't really accumulate that many pro points to qualify for the league anyway. So the system is fair. It's really fair in the sense that if you and your 3 teammates think you're pro players, if you think you could be good enough to go pro, show up to the 2Ks, sign up for the 2Ks, and prove it to everyone. There's no other obstacle there. And so that's what's beautiful about Pro Points, is that every year, everyone starts at 0, and the best players will rise to the top. Now, there's going to be 3 points of controversy that I'm going to mention. The first of which is going to be playing those GBs every day. The second of which is going to be CWL Northern Arena. And the third one is going to be what went down at CWL New Orleans. First and foremost are those 5 daily GBs. The problem is that we'll start with this. For the 10 teams that qualify for North America, based on how well they performed at the early 2Ks and CWL Dallas, there was like 5 or 6 teams that were almost definitely qualified. They were practically locked in for the Pro League. They did well enough that they're all set, and those teams all deserved it. Those are the 5 or 6 best teams in North America. And, for example, we're going to look at Team Envious here. So this is the Team Envious team page from Call of Duty Gamepedia. Shout out to them for this information. And as you can see, this is the way their season went. They got top 16 in the first 2K. They got top 4 in another 2K. Then they got top 32, but then they got top 8. And they show up to Dallas, and they got top 8, which is a really solid placing. So... and then the next 2K after that, they got top 8. Next one, they got top 16. They consistently got top 8 or top 16 in almost all these 2Ks, and they kept racking up those pro points. So even though their best placing out of all this stuff here, ignore the UMG thing because that has nothing to do with pro points, their best placing was top 4. So even though this team didn't win much, and they barely were in the top 4, they were consistently doing good enough. They had enough pro points that going into New Orleans, all they had to do is not be absolutely horrendous, and they would be fine. And at New Orleans, they were kind of disappointing. They lost to some teams they shouldn't have lost to, but then at the end, they got, a couple nice wins, and they finished top 12. And going into the Pro League, a lot of people are saying, oh, Envious is a disappointment. Oh, I don't think this roster, is that good after all. They were overhyped at the beginning of the year. But as far as getting to that Pro League, they're all good. They did their job, and that's an example of pro points working. So heading into CWL New Orleans, I'd say there were about 7 and maybe 8 teams that fell under this category, where all throughout the season up until this point, they did good enough that as long as they, didn't lose every single map they played at CWL New Orleans, they would qualify for the Pro League. Congrats to them. And that's the situation heading into CWL New Orleans, was the fact that there was a lot of teams that I'm not going to really talk about because they qualified. They were there to win the event. They weren't worried about their league spot, or at least, they had to do the bare minimum to secure their league spot. For example, Team Envious had that disappointing 12th place finish. They finished 8th. They're currently right now 8th in pro points. So that's the story, is that they're the 8th team, and I don't think they were really sweating. There was no specific series where they're like, oh, this team better win, or if this team loses, then watch out, Envious. Even though they hadn't officially qualified for most of the tournament, they played knowing that they were doing just good enough to qualify, and that was the 8th team. Now, the debate is all about teams 9, 10, 11, 12, and even 13. That little swatch of 5 teams was, it was fiercely competitive. There was so much drama at CWL New Orleans for those 2, 9, and 10 pro point spots. So now that I explained that, I know that the drama of GBs and pro points, it's all surrounding that little back end, that 9th and 10th spot, where there was, I think, 4 or 5 teams that were competing for it. So now I'm going to get back to my point about game battles, now that I explained that. So you go back to GBs. So all these pro players, especially the ones that were, at the back end of the 9-10 spot, was so important that they got those 5 GBs in every day, because they knew that come CWL New Orleans, if maybe they only played 4 GBs a day, or maybe they missed one of those days where they didn't play at all because they were too busy, that could be the reason they miss out on a league spot come CWL New Orleans. Because GBs every day, if you didn't play in the 2Ks at all, or if you did crap in the 2Ks and you didn't go to any event, but you played your 5 GBs every day, you as a player would be like so far away compared to all the other pro players. If I played my 5 GBs every day and won 5 GBs every day, I would have quite a few pro points, but nothing compared to everyone else that actually played well at 2Ks. So for those individuals that are playing those GBs, those wins are virtually meaningless to them unless you're one of those pro players. But at the same time, you can argue that they're trying to become pro players, that they love the competitive atmosphere, and they love the whole idea of them accumulating pro points. Like, yeah, I have pro points, I'm a pro player. So you can't fault them for that. These guys are having fun playing competitive Call of Duty. But for these pro points, for these pro players that are in the 9 and 10 spot, it was huge. They have to play their 5 GBs every day. Otherwise, it's going to haunt them later. So then you come to a situation where game battles, you go on their service, you schedule a match. Maybe the app, you schedule a match. You and your team of 4 players say, we would like to find a match on the GB ladder, the pro point ladder. And keep in mind, it's not the team of 4 that has to do it. It's any 4 players, because each player has their own pro point value. And as long as each player gets their own 5 GBs independently, they're done. So people would just say, who wants to play GBs with me? Like a pro player would say, oh, somebody help me get my 5 GBs in. And it would be a random team of like 4 pro players that aren't on the same team, but they're all well-established pro players. They'll be playing GBs together. So you've got this team that says, we're playing on the ladder. And then some team, Joe Schmo, me and my brother or something, out of our basement, accept it, and we got a team of 4 that's ready to play the match. Maybe the match happens. Maybe the pro players actually lose because there was some terrible host connection. Maybe the pro players win 250-1 in a hard point. Doesn't matter. Somebody wins. Somebody gets their pro points. Somebody goes, on their way to getting their 5 GB wins for that day taken care of. But what happens if me and my Joe Schmo basement people don't show up because one person says, oh, sorry guys, I can't play right now, oops, we can't show up for the match, or somebody's internet just totally shuts down for an hour, right? If we can't get into that match, then, it just gets marked as a loss. So if you don't show up, the other team gets a free win. They don't have to play, they just get their win. It's the same thing for pro points. They're like, oh, we got a win, hooray. So then you create a situation where for these 5 GBs every day, these pro players, obviously, it's important for the scene as a whole that it exists, I'd say, but they hated it. They despise that they have to do these 5 GBs every day. They're like, oh, I got to do it. So, I'm not going to accuse any particular players or teams of it, but when you have a system like this, it's obvious that you're going to create a situation where a team of 4 matches up with another team of 4, and then Team B and Team A just reports the same thing. They say, oh, Team A won. But they didn't play the game. You don't have to prove that the game was played. As long as both teams are in on it, all you have to do is that, they both just submit, Team A won, here was the score, okay. And Team A got their win, but nobody had to play anything. And that's really hard to catch, because maybe if there's one account that's giving everyone free wins, you can see who played that one account. But if, you're always mixing it up, then maybe you could be getting free wins from somewhere else. And, sometimes maybe people honestly couldn't make it to the match, So that's a free win, but at the same time, there's nothing you can really do about it. So that's where we get into the drama here. Because throughout the course of everything leading up to CWL New Orleans, all these 5 GB points per day, all that drama, I'm sure teams were getting free wins out of it. Somewhere down the road, teams and players were getting free wins because they were lucky. And somewhere down the road, that teams and players were getting free wins off of these accounts that were designed to give people free wins, or off of agreements that they made with like 4 other people that maybe they paid them $20 under the table. I don't know. Some sort of, shady stuff that's going on where they both go into a GB and then they report this team lost, this team won or something. So that's the GB drama, is just the fact that the way the system is designed is that I can't fault anybody for abusing it, because the system let itself be abused like that, and these players are getting these free wins here and there. I'm just going to put an apology in here real quick for how long this video is probably going to be, because this issue is just so complex. You know what I'm saying? It is just so much going on to explain adequately why people in Group A are angry, why people in Group B are angry, why the system is good but has some issues. Next, we're going to talk about CWL Northern Arena. It was announced this was going to be an event in Montreal. It was going to be a LAN. They were going to invite the top teams in North America. I'm all for another Call of Duty event. Absolutely. I mean, I was like, oh, sweet, we got another event. It's going to be in Montreal. It's going to be Canada. And last time there was an event in Canada, the two best teams were both amateur teams that were Canadian players. And that's happening. That's a Cineplex Canadian Championship. That's going to happen later in the year. But this one was actually getting pro players. It was going to get the best teams. I was like, oh, this is so awesome. But then Optic didn't want to go because the prize pool wasn't high enough. TK wanted to go, but they couldn't because of personal reasons. And from there, all the next best teams got invited. You know, the teams 3, let's see, there was 8 teams invited. Teams 3 through 10 on the Pro Point ladder got an invite and decided they wanted to go. So, now the issue here is that, you know, if it's a LAN where you get some practice on LAN, there's a prize pool that's worth playing, you get to play in Canada, that's all fine and dandy. But the event also awarded pro points. So this was weird because you're going to see players that are earning way more pro points just for going to the event and playing average than if they happen to do well at the 2K. So I don't know. I'll put my opinions on this at the end of this little segment here. But let's look at the numbers. So this is the CWL Northern Arena, how it shook out. So LG, E United, FaZe, those 3 teams are all qualified anyway, and I'm sure these pro points just put them over the edge. You look at 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, Team Envy, Echo Fox, both of them were already taken care of. Now we get into the interesting bit. So next threat, Methods ended up getting called up to a better team, but Sensor, Ricky, and Nagafin all ended up on teams that were in the mix for those last 2 pro point spots. They got 1,800 pro points each for finishing 4th at this event. So you got to say, hey, this team did well at this event. They deserve the pro points because they played really well. You know, they were better than those other 4 teams. Sure. Ground Zero. Each one of these players got 1,200 points for getting 5th, 6th. They didn't even play well at this event, but all 4 of those players, I'm pretty sure, all 4 of those players ended up on teams that were contending for pro points at the end of the year. And then you get to 7th, 8th, where to be 7th, 8th, this was a double elimination tournament. Both of these teams lost in round 1, lost in round 2. So they just crapped out. They didn't even win at this tournament, but each one of them got 800 pro points. They racked up on these pro points. So now we're going to look at, let me bear with me here as I adjust this. Now you have the 2K results. Here's the 2K from this exact weekend. So EG was the best team that wasn't at this event. Rise Nation also couldn't go. I forgot to mention that. But Rise Nation was fine on pro points. Evil Geniuses was the best team that wasn't at this event. So now you're thinking, well, if EG can't go at this event, you know, it's not their fault because they should win the 2K because the competition's so much easier. And you have to give them credit. TK and Optic were still playing at the 2K. They absolutely smacked in the 2K. They dominated. They got 1st and 2nd. But EG got 4th place. So you got to give them credit because they did really well in the 2K. They got all the way to the semifinals. They got 800 pro points each for it. So they've had a great 2K, or at least a really good 2K, because they got all the way. I can't remember if they lost to Optic or TK, but they lost to one of those 2 teams, and they beat everyone else they faced, and they got 800 pro points each. Go back to Enigma 6. Enigma 6, one of the teams that they're literally competing for a league spot, went to Montreal, lost 2 series back-to-back, didn't do jack diddly, and got 800 pro points. All of them got 800 pro points. So, and the teams above them got more pro points. So EG didn't get an invite to this event because they were lagging behind because they had a poor CWL Dallas. So it didn't set them back way too far back, but it set them back. Not only did it was one of the reasons they couldn't get into pool play at CWL New Orleans, and it set them back. Now, you can have your own feelings about this because, you know, the amount of points you got from Northern Arena wasn't exorbitantly higher than the 2K. So, you know, everyone's going to have their own opinions about it. So, we show up to the event. You know, all these teams have their pro points. All these teams have their scenarios for what they should probably need to do to qualify. I remember in years prior, it was a little bit more obvious about Team A just needs to do this to qualify because there was less competition. But to have 5 teams, potentially, I think it could have been 6 teams actually, for 2 spots, there were so many crazy scenarios that nobody could really predict anything until all the dust had settled and we knew where everyone had finished. So, people didn't know who had qualified for the Pro League all the way up until Sunday morning. And even then, there was some really important matches on Sunday morning to determine who would make Pro League or not. But the problem was where MLG let us down is that they allowed players to accumulate points through game battles at the event. So all of these teams that should just be focused on playing CWL New Orleans and performing well at one of these 7 or 8 events that take place during the entire season, literally this doesn't happen that often, a freaking global open event. They should just show up to the event and have to worry about playing well at that event. But no, their Pro League status also hinged on the fact that during those days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they also got their 5 GBs in every day. Because MLG didn't have the oversight to step in and say, whatever GB points you earned from this point forward are cut off, so there's no point in playing GBs at the event. Now, I don't know if they actually thought about it and made an executive decision. I don't know what their reasons are. I don't know if we'll really get an explanation from them because, it's all said and done and they just want to wipe their hands clean and move on to the Pro League. But it was a really big disappointment that teams and players could earn points playing GBs at the event. So, with the situation we explained before, where teams could make or miss the Pro League by numbers of, by hundreds or tens of pro points, teams were playing their 5 GBs, and now you have an even crazier situation where a team would finish their matches for the day, or in between matches when they should be, getting food, relaxing, talking about their upcoming match, they're like, oh no, we have to play GBs. We have to get on something. We have to hop into something and get our GBs done for the day also. So these teams were stressing about the tournament and playing 5 GBs, winning 5 GBs every day. It's so disappointing to see from MLG. It would have been so easy just to say, draw a line in the sand and say, whatever your pro points were at the beginning of the event, we're only going to add what you earned at the event. We're not going to add any extra GB points to those numbers. MLG, it seems like there was no obstacle to them saying that. It seemed like that was something they totally could have done, and it's flat out disappointing that they didn't. I think it might have just been an oversight that they didn't really think about it and they forgot about it, and then it was too late to make changes. But that's what happened, is Enigma 6 and Evil Geniuses and Complexity and Doom, they were accumulating GB points during the event. So now you ask yourself, are these players actually spending most of their time not at the event playing GBs, playing from the hotel room, racking up points? Or are they getting free wins from somewhere? Are they doing something shady? And that creates an interesting dilemma. There's a lot of drama here because if you look at the numbers, if you just look at the computer stuff, it says that these guys, I might be wrong here because it's really recent. It says that these guys played their 5 GBs on Friday, and they played their 5 GBs on Saturday, for example. And that there was no issues with that. But then you think about it, and you think about outside the numbers, logistically, and you say, did Evil Geniuses actually play their games? Did anyone see them playing pro point matches? Were they in the lobby of the hotel room or some meeting room in a hotel room playing their GBs? Were they playing GB matches in between their matches at the event? Yes or no? It's like, did they or didn't they? There's not a lot of evidence for either side. So it opened the door. So this is, CWL Northern Arena opened the door for MLG to really get bashed. And lucky for them, they were okay. But letting players play their GBs at events, once again, MLG opened that door for a lot of drama to take place and a lot of criticism. And this time it just didn't work out in their favor because I'm about to explain what happened. So here are the placings from CWL New Orleans. Keep in mind, it's going to look kind of weird because I'm going to be flipping back and forth. But Doom Clan, they had a really tough matchup. They had to play EG, I think possibly 2 of the 3 best teams in the entire open bracket, just because of bracket problems that I won't get into because it's another concern with MLG. ended up having to play each other for a spot in pool play, and Doom Clan was the loser there. They lost. They had to go through losers bracket. But they busted out a losers bracket, and I think they won 1, 2, 3 straight matches in order to get a top 12 placing. They did their job by getting 12th place. As you can see, boom, on the Pro Point ladder, they are sitting at 9th place. They qualified. Now, Envious, you can see they're at 18,000. Doom was at 15,400. They qualified. Or no, sorry, I got totally mixed up. Envy was at 73 grand. Doom was at 64 grand. They both qualified because they did well enough. Back to CWL New Orleans. Evil Geniuses came out of the open bracket, had a phenomenal event, and got 8th place. They were so far behind Enigma 6 and Complexity that they were so far behind Enigma 6 and Complexity that they had to get top 8 just to qualify possibly for the Pro League. If they got top 6, they would have been fine. But they had to get top 8, and then they had to get lucky, which is mind-blowing. But they did. They actually did it. They had a fantastic event. They went 3-1 in pool play, and then they lost in the first round and could have gone out top 12, and I can't remember who they beat. I think it was Doom Clan. They beat them to secure top 8. So they literally did everything they had to do to qualify for the Pro League. They got 8th place. They qualified for the Pro League. And now, part of the reason they qualified for the Pro League is because the choke from Complexity and Enigma 6. Both of them had really bad events, partly because they had really challenging groups. So, of course, the group played a huge role in it. But, there's a group draw. You can't really do anything about that. And they just didn't play well. They had to play each other in the round of 20. A loser gets top 20. So one of them would lose and just not qualify. That ends up being Complexity. They finish 12th in pro points. They don't qualify. Boo-hoo, sad for them. Enigma 6 then gets top 16, and it was huge whether they would finish top 12, because if they finished top 12, they would qualify for the Pro League. Evil Geniuses would not. And if you think about it, it's kind of fair, because EG was far behind Enigma 6, and Enigma 6 only placed one spot behind EG, so you could say, yep, Enigma 6 deserved it. Sorry, EG, you had a good tournament, but so did E6. But then Enigma 6 can't clutch up. They lose. They get top 16, right next to Lightning Pandas. Lightning Pandas was a wildcard team where they had to finish top 8 or top 6 to really have a chance, and they didn't, which sucks because they actually went to Game 5 against TK. Before even nobody except for LG made TK come closer to losing and made them more uncomfortable than Lightning Pandas. And I think Lightning Pandas had a phenomenal event, and it sucks that they got top 16 because they played so much better. And I actually think that for National Circuit, which is a whole different story, they're going to be the favorite to win the NA National Circuit, which they might be playing in the Canadian one. We'll talk about that later. But anyways, now you comes down to Doom Clan. Great event. They qualify. Complexity, Lightning Pandas, not good enough. They don't qualify. And then you have Enigma 6 and Evil Geniuses literally 45 pro points away from each other. 45 pro points as a team. Keep in mind that these teams had like 63,400 something pro points. They're 45 away from each other. That means that take someone on Enigma 6, General. If General 3 weeks ago only played 2 of his 5 GBs one day, that's the reason they're not in the Pro League. If Dashy, for example, had host problems in one of the 2Ks, and they end up losing in a Game 5 in round of 16 in a 2K. That Game 5, that's the reason they didn't make the Pro League. Literally every single thing that EG did throughout the season was the reason they snuck into the Pro League, otherwise they wouldn't have. And every single thing that Enigma 6 couldn't have done, if they just did, if they got to one more round of the 2K, if they maybe played those GBs that they didn't play a month ago or something, that would have gotten them in the Pro League. I mean, it is absolutely absurd to think that the difference between them, and that happens to just by chance be the difference between what team made the Pro League and what team didn't, was 45 pro points. It was really terrible luck by both MLG and the players involved that it would have to be so close to determine the Pro League, which meant so much. It money-wise, prestige-wise, it means everything to the players on both teams. Now this is heartbreaking to talk about because it's just bad luck for MLG because, if it went down any other way where it was more obvious that either EG or E6 deserved the spot, then they would be able to just wipe their hands dry and be like, well, as everyone can tell, this team deserved it because they played better. period, end of story. But it ended up being this painfully close, and that ends up being a crisis for MLG because of the fact that these players had to play their pro points on event. I don't know if both of these teams all 4 of their players played their 5 GBs every day on Friday, Saturday, Sunday during the event. I don't know if that's what ended up happening, or if it was like a mix where some people did but some people didn't, and it was a sloppy mix between the two. I don't know the true story here, and I have to apologize for not knowing that, because I should know these things if I'm the one explaining it to you. But the fact of the matter is that if any of the players on EG played less GBs at the event, they wouldn't have qualified. And if anyone on Enigma 6 happened to play more GBs at the event, they would be in the Pro League. And now, Censor tweets, he says, "I'm extremely disappointed in MLG. I will be making a video today." And people are like, "Oh no, Censor's pissed because he didn't qualify. He thinks that MLG actually screwed him." Oh no, this is the worst. This is the nightmare for MLG, because now they're coming under fire from a pro player that says, "You're the reason I'm not in the Pro League. I'm extremely disappointed in you." This is the crisis for MLG. So now people look into it. They're like, what happened to Censor? Censor had about 300 points of pro points deducted because it was obvious that he was playing against an account that gave free wins. So there was an account that they could trace that was giving people free wins, and Censor was one of the players that on a few different occasions played against that team and won against that team. So, maybe MLG was incorrect, but I'm about 90% sure that what happened was MLG caught Censor getting free wins through the GB system and deducted those points. So now Censor Censor doesn't have a lot of ammunition because he got caught, and I don't know what his video is going to be. Pay attention for that when it drops and what he's going to say about it. But basically, MLG caught Censor getting free pro points that he didn't earn and pulled those away. But the problem is that all 4 players on Evil Geniuses, what's to say they weren't doing the same thing and they were cheating smarter? Because, to call these players and teams cheaters, I'm going to use the word because I don't know what else to say, but honestly, they're not cheating. All they did was they abused the system that was meant to be abused, right? It's more of MLG's fault that all this had to go down rather than the players individually. But what is the likelihood that those 4 players on Evil Geniuses were completely clean? No way in the process, none of them used any of those GB free wins. Think about it. The odds that they were all clean are low if you're a skeptic like me. And maybe you can be on EG side, and maybe you can say, yes, they went the high road. They got all their pro points cleanly. They didn't do anything shady or under the table. But if they did do something shady, which I'm going to personally believe, I'm not faulting them for it. You can have your own opinion on it. I think that they were doing roughly the same thing as Censor, but they just happened to not get caught for it. They were cheating smarter, essentially. And to add fire to the story, somebody said, look at EG's record. They got pro point wins at 1 a.m. on the event. So this Saturday of the event, players on the EG roster got wins at like 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. or maybe even 4 a.m., I think. Somebody dug that up and found that. So then there's a massive argument that says, look, we caught them cheating because clearly they weren't awake at 4 a.m. on the day of their tournament playing their GBs. No way that was happening. Because that would mean that they got 2 hours of sleep. And then you got person who can't be that's saying, what if this team legitimately played their GBs in the middle of the freaking hotel? What if they did because they knew how freaking important it was? Either way, this is terrible on MLG's side because either EG cheated their way to a pro spot or EG had to get 2 hours of sleep at a freaking event because they had to play their GBs that day too. It's just sad. But the point is, EG, their records show that somewhere at an absurd time late at night, they were getting those pro point GB wins, and we are not conclusively sure whether the team was actually there together getting those wins, or if they were doing what a lot of other teams we know were probably doing, which is some sort of method where they were getting free wins, getting those points taken care of. So now all the dust settles. CWL New Orleans is over, and EG is in the Pro League, and Enigma 6 is not. And there's nothing you can say about it, because it's going to happen, and that's all settled and done. But now is when we can finally sort of point out the flaws of the pro point system. And I hate to criticize MLG because I have so much respect for the way they've constructed the system, the pro point system, the tournaments. They run these tournaments with a lot of class. So when I criticize them out of love because they're doing a million things right, and some of the things they're doing wrong usually don't come back to hurt them in the end. Usually when they make a mistake, I might realize it and go, well, what if this happens? That would look really bad for MLG. But then it doesn't happen and nobody cares in the end. And that's CWL Northern Arena. Because EG qualified, and because Lightning Pandas was so far from qualifying, the fact that Northern Arena existed didn't affect the the pro league chase at all. And they didn't come under fire for it in the end because the results, they got lucky in that sense. But with letting players play GBs at the event, they got so badly burned by it. So that's the problem, is that MLG makes these little mistakes, these little oversights here and there, and they have the potential to really screw them over. And this was just one of those little oversights where they didn't stop players from playing their GBs at events. They didn't make it so that the pro points you earn from playing GBs at events are worthless. They didn't draw that line in the sand, and they just got unlucky in it. It just absolutely cost them in the end. So on a personal level, I'm happy that EG made the Pro League because of the CWL Northern Arena stuff, and I have no hard feelings towards the players of EG or Enigma 6 because there's so many question marks about whether they actually cheated, or whether they didn't cheat, or whether they kind of did, or whether nobody cheated except for Censor, or everyone cheated and everyone knew about it. These are all massive question marks that I can't answer because I can't do the investigative work. I don't have enough links to players. So I'm not going to really have an opinion on it. I'm not going to crucify players or teams for it. The result is that I'm happy for EG because they weren't at CWL Northern Arena and they deserve to be in the Pro League. And it's clear from the way they played at CWL New Orleans that they are a much better team than Enigma 6 Complexity and Lightning Pandas. Doom, I don't know, not so much. I don't know if Doom compared to E6 and Complexity have a better roster. But they played better at New Orleans, so hey, that's how it is, They earned it. And EG is far and away better than E6 Complexity and Lightning Pandas because they played better at CWL New Orleans. So at the end of the day, I'm happy with the way things shook out, and I'm not shaking my stick and pissed at MLG. But the problem is that people that wanted to see Censor in the league are pissed. And all of the Enigma 6 roster is probably really, angry about that. Because they got absolutely robbed, and there were just quite a few different things that MLG could have done, with the most important being not letting people get their GBs at events, and that's where the drama stems from. Number one, the fact that players should be asked to play GBs every day, when all it does is open up the door for drama in the long term, but it doesn't let me in my basement compete with pro players because just doing my 5 GBs every day isn't enough. So that entire system really needs to be examined. I love the concept of it, and I love the idea of it because it's good for GB, it's good for game battles, it's good for MLG. It looks really good on paper, but I really think they just need to look at that under a microscope and make some changes to it for next year. That is something they need to make some fixes. And then CWL Northern Arena. They opened the door for some crisis, and it ended up they got lucky. And then letting players play GBs at events. It just breaks my heart that they didn't do that, and that's where the drama stems from. Hopefully you are super well educated on this entire crisis, and there's no next step. The next step is obviously Censor's video, and possibly a statement from MLG, possibly a statement from Enigma 6, whatever Censor says about it. That's something you got to keep an eye on. But for the most part, this entire drama is said and done. But as you can see by how long this video is, thank you for staying with me to the end. It is so incredibly complex and nuanced, and it deeply reflects the Pro Point system and the flaws of the Pro Point system, as well as the good things about it. Overall, I love the system. But as a fan of competitive Call of Duty, it breaks my heart and just disappoints me to see how this turned out. That's all I've got to say on it. I'm sorry I made this such a long video. I really love to talk about Call of Duty esports. I really just make sure you guys are aware of everything. And like I said, anybody that actually made it this far into the video, it's because you wanted to know more about this drama. And I hope I covered it adequately for you. I don't even know if anybody got to this point in the video. That's what's going to be hilarious, is that I know a lot of people are going to start watching the video and go, oh, hell no, this is too long. And I know a lot of people that are huge fans of Call of Duty already know this whole drama, and they don't have time for a video like this because they know what's going on. And there's a really small subsection of Call of Duty fans that have time to watch this video, but also don't already know the basics of this whole situation, that would actually come and watch this entire video. So if you are listening to me right now, you got to the end of the video, huge shout out to you. You are amazing. Maybe show me some love just to let you know that you watched it, because it makes me feel better about myself, makes me feel better about the time I invested in it. But regardless, thank you for watching. Nonetheless, I will be back with more Call of Duty videos. I got a lot of ideas for the future. I love talking about Call of Duty. I'm really confident, in terms of making these videos, even if the quality of what you're watching might not be so high. Perhaps it needs to be a podcast, but that is what we got going for you today. I hope you guys understand a lot better. If you still got any more questions, mstrite61 on Twitter and Reddit, hit me up. But other than that, that's all I got to say. See you later, guys.